you get to black belt, that's when you start to express yourself artistically. So what does that mean? Well, that means what are you drawing, right? What are you painting? The quote that we use on the back of our school t-shirts is the art of fighting without fighting. The highest form of fighting is love. Therefore, it's not to fight, but to dissolve and dispel aggression and conflict peacefully and lovingly. I always like to think that, if we can be more like Mr. Miyagi rather than, John Sensei, we could actually really change the world.
Welcome to another Martial Mind Power podcast. I'm Jatinder with Sifu Lak. Sifu, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, thank you. Very good, very good. Very excited for this podcast today.
Absolutely.
How are you doing?
So I'm good, thank you. I'm good. And you want to do something a little bit different. And instead of our usual book, we're going to go to the original truth this time. And I believe it's page 27, I think you wanted to go over, or 28? 29, sorry. 29.
So this is actually a special chapter that I shared with my class yesterday. And the reason I shared it with the class yesterday is because on the previous weekend, we had a large grading, a lot of students graded. And amongst those gradees were 2 students that were going for their black belt. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a whole thing about the whole black belt conception, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this chapter on page 29 of the book Original Truth is called Full
of Emptiness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And below that, what did it say?
The true meaning of a black belt.
All right. Yes, exactly. The true meaning of a black belt. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to go through this chapter and really share the depths of the true meaning of a black belt and what relevance has that got to Full of Emptiness, as this chapter title, for this. So I thought let's start to explore that today, but we're going to do this in a bit of a exploratory way where I'll ask you some questions and let's see what you come up with, and I'll reveal the underlying truths behind that.
Cool.
So the first sections is titled Myths and Ancestral Secrets of the Black Belt. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when you think of a black belt, right? I guess the first question to ask really is, what do you think? What comes to mind when you think about black belt?
So this is an interesting one, because when I used to do martial arts and when I was doing jiu-jitsu, I remember this conversation with my sensei at the time. And so I just got my black belt, and we sat down, at the beginning of the front of the dojo, and he asked a similar question. He said, he was talking about belts and all this kind of thing. And he said, now that you've got your black belt, what does that mean for you? And I sat there and I went, I'm not 100% sure. I said, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I've reached a certain level, but yet there's still so much to learn, kind of thing. And it's like, I'm not sure. And he said, exactly. He said, black belt is confusion, right? And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, it's like you've gone through all the colors, right? And now you got to a state of almost like, what's the word he used? He said, it's almost like a state of, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do with it now? Right. Yeah. That you've hit a milestone. How, and what do you do with it? And he goes, from now onwards, it's just about mastering and honing your skills. So when you say, what does a black belt mean to me? I suppose that's what comes to my mind, because that the way he said it at the time really hit home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, this is just the beginning. Yeah. That's how it felt like.
Yeah.
So that's what comes to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, with the space I want to actually kind of like explore in this question is really the positive perception and the negative
Mm,
perception of a black belt. What you're saying is actually spot on, right? And
mm,
like starts to stir the emotions and ideas around the meaning of a black belt and how individuals are interpreting that. And now,
mm,
in the wider sphere of understanding a black belt, there's really two aspects to it. Number one is mystique, okay, and this is really the positive side of things, and that is, you know, where it's black belt is full of charisma, is glamorous, there's a romance about it, you know, there's a nostalgia about it, there's a mystery, a fascination, a magic,
mm,
if it be a charm, an appeal, an allure, a state of awe or even awesomeness. Yeah. Um, and then there's a flip side. And the flip side is the negative side. And that is, which is what I would say is shrouded in skepticism, right?
mm,
Filled with doubt, distrust, suspicion, disbelief, and pessimism, as in, like, really? You're really a black belt?
mm, mm,
What makes you a black belt? Why are you so good? Kind of thing, you know.
mm, mm,
So these are the kind of like the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to black belt level, right?
yep.
And we'll talk about what that level means in due course, right? So this is kind of like starting to encroach on that space, and what we're going to do throughout this podcast is start to bust the myth
Mm,
around those things and really help you understand the true essence of what it is. So let me ask you another next question. Yeah, where do you think the black belt was born? How did
where
this
was
idea come about?
uh that's a good question. I think it was probably so I think it's ancient, right? In the sense of, you know, you got the master and the student, right? You got a form of kind of training that goes on. And I think how it came about, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was that initially there were no belts because the students used to learn direct from their master, for example. But as those classes got bigger and bigger, it became harder to distinguish like who's new, who's old, who knows where they are and stuff. So they had to create a sort of form of hierarchy.
Yeah,
And one of the ways to measure that was like a grading, like a belting system,
yeah,
just though they know who the advanced students are versus who the not so advanced students are.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's how it came about.
100%. You're spot
Right.
on. But so here's the next thing. Well, you said ancient, right? Or traditionally, right? So how long ago do you think that was?
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and
Um,
I mean, you can go down to years, you know, the actual years if you want.
that's a very dude, this must be really old, man. I mean, it must be like near the beginning of martial arts, probably to something. I don't know when that came about. That'd be quite interesting to find out. But I would imagine, yeah, I would imagine quite early on when actually it started becoming a bit more mainstream in that kind of era, maybe.
Okay, that's this, and what does mainstream? When does mainstream start?
That's a good question as well. I'm gonna say probably 1900s. Yeah,
1900. Oh
yeah.
wow. So,
Mainstream wise, because
yeah. Okay. Okay.
because I the martial art has been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I also know that they used to be very secretive and it was very tight knit, close kind of community kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you used to have masters, you used to fight with masters and the student, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then as time went by, that started to kind of grow. And I think that was probably the 19 somethings. I don't know.
You're actually very close.
Well,
Very close, right?
yeah.
So in the mid 1880s,
Oh,
the founder of judo, Jigoro
yeah.
Kano, came up with this idea that, you know, his classes, exactly as you said, they were getting a bit big. So you had experienced students, and you had, you know, beginners and intermediates as well. And he wanted to try and gauge, without having to, you know, think too hard about it, you know, what level people were at. So
Mm-hmm.
um, um, originally, this idea, he was inspired from a local swimming group that he used to go to.
Hey.
Right. So the actual grading system came from a swimming grading scheme that they had. Right.
Oh, wow.
So he implemented uh, white belts and black belts. Right. So the white belts are is what's referred to as mudansha, and the black belts represented Udansha. So the white color represents simplicity, purity, emptiness, and you being at the beginning of this martial journey. And then black representing you being filled with knowledge. Now, we're going to talk about full of emptiness. So we're going to kind of also kind of dispel that as well. But just to give you an idea, it was not till later that black belts started being embellished with red stripes, and then the red stripes, the black belts with red stripes were completely replaced by red belts later on. Okay,
Right.
there are some arts that actually, when you get to the highest level, will eventually replace the belt, even though they say red belt, which is something where in judo, for instance, is affiliated with people that are on ninth dan or over. In some systems, they go back to white. So you start with white and go back to white. And this is really, which is kind of the mantra for Jeet Kune Do, where Bruce Lee talked about this idea of the three stages of learning: the stage of partiality, which is what he called the running to extreme, which is where you're becoming aware of the things you don't know. So you've got unconscious incompetence and conscious incompetence. Then you go into fluidity, which is the two halves of one whole, where you starting to cultivate your techniques, and you get into conscious competence. And then eventually you go into emptiness, which is the formless form, where you're now unconsciously competent, and you basically second nature, right?
Yeah.
So slowly we're starting to get to the conclusion on that. So there are, so in Jeet Kune Do, for instance, although it's not represented by a colored belt, ultimately, if white represents emptiness, right, and your end state is emptiness, you end up at white, technically, right?
Yeah.
So just wanted to kind of put that into the mix as well.
It's like completing the cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, the next section really talks about the origins of the black belt. Now, you've actually already mentioned the origins in a way, where you started talking about how different clans used to, you know, protect their secrets and fight with each other, especially where you had like instructors protecting their clans and having these, you know, battles between, or even wars between each clans.
Secret styles.
Exactly. And this is where you know, it's traditionally martial arts were used to protect families or protect your clans, you know, especially in barbaric times. And the clans would protect their martial arts secrets, so they wouldn't want anybody else knowing about it, because they'd want to use their combative advantages, whether it's, you know, their structure, the biomechanical efficiencies over some other clan's system or style, or whatever you want to call it.
Monkey style versus snake style or something, right?
Exactly. And although they weren't looking to, they might have been looking to better other clans or to overtake other clans, or they were just protecting their clans, you know. So either way, that was an innate part of it. And when a new student or a new member was initiated, there would be an initiation ceremony where the new initiate would undergo a ceremony, an initiation ceremony, which is almost which is symbolic of being brought into the family, and formal acceptance of that, and also a formal submission to the teacher. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's
like a loyalty and a bond, right?
absolutely 100%. And over time, the initiate or student would be assessed for their progression through cultivating skills and knowledge, growth and proficiency, hard work and perseverance, justice and fairness, courage and indomitable spirit, mercy and forgiveness, politeness and respect, honesty and sincerity, honor and integrity, loyalty and dedication, as you mentioned, character and self-control, and finally self-mastery, right? And the idea would be that they would then go through the different stages of the martial arts system, and eventually reaching Chodan, which is the first degree black belt and beyond. Okay. So next question is, do you know what the meaning of a sensei is?
So from my understanding is teacher, guide.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that is the general meaning of sensei or sifu or shifu, depending if it's Cantonese or Mandarin pronunciation. Okay. So in Japan, sensei means one before or twice born. Now, there's got two levels of understanding on this. One's on a physical level, where it refers to somebody that's got more age and experience.
Yep.
And then the spiritual level is actually a reference to the actual two Japanese characters that make up that word. And it literally means one who has been before, right? So that's the first part of it, or somebody that's filled with ancestral spirit. So this is wisdom that's been passed on, right? So that's kind of quite a profound meaning of what sensei is. So it's useful to kind of understand that when you're submitting and surrendering yourself to a teacher, number one, that you do your due diligence to make sure that that teacher is of sound mind character, and is aligned with the virtues, values that you're seeking. Hopefully those virtues and values are of the highest level of consciousness, and that will help align you to your true authentic higher self and your original truth, and therefore the source. Because ultimately there's about body, it's about mind, and it's about spirit. Now, if some of those elements are missing, then you're not going to be a complete martial artist, because how can an instructor or a sifu or a sensei that hasn't got it give it to you? It's impossible. You're not going to get it. You can only give something that you've already got. So you must seek those qualities within your sensei, for instance, right? So
so is that that bit you talk about, the reborn thing, or them again, it's almost like, could you say it's like almost like the enlightenment stage where they've come to some greater understanding? So it's almost like, you know, they were just normal, and now they're not, you know, that's a bit using weird words there, but they like get to a stage where they've got the awakening now. So it's almost like actually waking up now.
100%. I mean, that would be your ideal instructor, somebody that's had a spiritual awakening, potential spiritual enlightenment, that understands that. So that's, you know, somebody that understands that, but doesn't act in that space is still not quite there. Now, everybody's on a journey. So, you know, if you're at the level of physical cultivation and you find yourself a sensei that's at the physical level cultivation stage, that's fine. That person will be able to give you that, okay? But as you start to transcend and grow, you're going to have to seek somebody of higher consciousness state that can help guide you towards that. You know, somebody that doesn't know where they are, where they're going, can't help you find your path forwards. Somebody that's already there is the person that you need to discover, and then have that person guide you towards that, right? And seek that in yourself. and this is ultimately where we're talking about. So you know, not all martial arts instructors have to be, you know, all the way up there. Okay. It's relative to where you are. So each student will seek the teacher that's right for them where they are. Now, if you haven't got past your body, right, how are you going to get to your mind? Sorry, your spirit, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is how we do things in the West. But remember, we've spoke about this in other podcasts where actually in ancient martial arts, you started off with spirit and then the mind and then the body, right? We don't do that in the West, right? Because it's too far away. You can only lead somebody one to the boundary and slightly beyond where they currently are in order for them to progress, right? And that mindset of saying, okay, let's start cultivating spirit and then help heal other people's spirit. Let's start cultivating mind, heal other people's minds. Let's start cultivating body, heal other people's body. So you're a healer first, you're a self-practitioner and healer first, right? You get that experience and only then learn combat, right? We don't do that way. We want to go straight into combat and then try to work out whether our body's ready for it, and then try and get our body into shape. Or what happens quite often is students will apply to learn martial arts and they'll say, hey, actually, I'm not fit enough. I want to go to the gym. And they'll go take up running, go blow out their knees and ankles and lower back, okay? And then come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm fucking injured, yeah? It's because you went and fucking did something with overzealousness, with good intention, but you haven't had proper professional advice and training in it. You haven't done fuck all before, and now you've gone and shot your joints, yeah? Mm-hmm. And now you can't do anything. Right. So it's whatever you decide to do, you've got to do it with the right guidance. Otherwise, you end up hurting yourself. And the ankle, knee, joint problem, hips, and the lower back issues. When people say, "All right, you know, I need to get fit, go to the gym or start running on the pavement," you know, is the most common injury because that's people's idea of what getting fit is. Yeah. But, you know, we always say, you know, you got to make your training program specific to what it is you want to do. So if you want to become a professional swimmer, then whatever you do on land is not going to be relevant to swimming. The only way to improve swimming is to get swimming training, get swimming lessons, and practice that as much as you can in the water. Even Bruce Lee has a quote around that. You know, is like with martial arts. You know, he says, practicing without a partner. This isn't verbatim, by the way. Practicing without a partner is like dry land swimming. You know, or not sparring and not fighting is like dry land swimming. You know, you're never really going to know if you can actually swim. So it's a kind of a flip an analogy I can give you to that. Likewise, if you want to learn how to swim and you go train on the ground, it's not going to help. You need to get into the water and do it.
It's interesting, when you were saying that they used to cultivate the spirit and then the mind and then the body. They used to teach you martial art afterwards, because there's a very there's a Sikh tradition that is similar to that, in the sense that when somebody was initiated into the warrior side of things, right, they were always paired up with a teacher, yeah, and they were always told that, okay, whatever goes on for you, share it with your teacher, and he's going to guide you. Yeah. So they would then, if something would come up, they would say, okay, I've got these problems. And they would say, okay, no problem. Go meditate, do it this way. Go eat these foods, go do it. They would guide them. Yeah. And then when they knew that, okay, now they've got a grasp and a kind of idea of what they need to be doing, then they used to hand them over the weapons and start to train with the weapons. They didn't do it before they had that, exactly what you're saying. So it's quite interesting that these ancient traditions are pretty much cross-culture, right? In any martial kind of background or knowledge or understanding, they kind of exist.
Yeah. And we go through these 4 ages, right? And we're currently in what's in the Vedic culture known as Kali Yuga, right, or Kali Yuga, right, which is the dark age, right? The dark age is the least spiritual age, right? And then after that, you go into the spiritual stage, Satyug, right, and so on. So there's four different ages that we go through, and three of them are spiritual, and one of them is not. The one that is not is where we are now. So that's why we're not starting with the spirituality first, right? That's why we're not cultivating our spiritual faculties first. We're starting straight in combat, the lowest level possible. But where's the responsibility? Right. You know, when new students apply to learn martial arts, one of the first things I do is I do a questionnaire. And as part of that questionnaire, I ask them, you know, have you got criminal record? And, so, you know, recently an applicant said to me, he goes, oh, you know, I always find that question interesting, you know. And I said, you know, have you asked that? Have you been asked that question by other martial arts schools? And he said, no. And I said, so it's interesting that you mentioned that, but it wasn't in a context of applying to learn martial arts. And I said, well, actually, a lot of martial arts schools don't ask that question, and they should ask that question. And the reason I think it's important, and this is you know, not denigrating any other martial arts school, but the reason I think is important is because there's a social responsibility. If I'm teaching a psycho with a criminal record and violent tendencies, martial arts skills that can injure, maim, disable, or kill somebody, guess what? I've just armed a fucking lunatic. Yeah. Right. And I'm not going to let that happen under my watch. To the best of my ability, people lie all the time. And I've had people lie to me in the past, and it's come up later, right? Sometimes years later. And I'm like, oh, shit. Right. And I've had to get rid of people, and, you know, their unsound mind and characters come out in really evil ways. Yeah. So it's, if they can do that to someone that holds their hand and guides them, and they have love and respect and loyalty for, and the moment they get busted, all of a sudden they flip on you, right? Imagine what they can do when they're out there in the real world, right, against somebody that upsets them, and you've freaking just basically weaponized them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So this is the thing, right? So we've got to be really careful. But you know, when you have got the right teacher, and you and again, like I said, all student teacher relationship are respective to where that student is in time, where that teacher is in time, and hopefully that teacher is a few steps ahead of the student. Even one step ahead is more than enough, because that person can guide you that one step further. You know, that's all you need. But ultimately, you know, if you're going to want to aim for the highest state, then you've got to kind of find that, you know. But not everybody's going to start off there straight away, and that's really the key point that I'm trying to deliver with this. But you know, what happens as a consequence of this is that actually, traditionally, the students used to treat the senseis and sifus like God. They used to have that level of respect, you know. They used to do everything for them, you know, make sure that the senseis and sifus were not troubled, they had everything they needed, and really look after them. And any indiscretions against the sifu and sensei were really frowned upon. So you see movies where especially the old Chinese movies, where you've heard the comment saying, "You disrespect my sensei," I must fight you.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That's based on real dynamics, real social dynamics between the love and respect for a student and the teacher. That's a beautiful thing, right? If you fight for, you know, something that's meaningful and good. But just, you know, being indoctrinated and doing it, you know, off the back is just a bit silly, right? What's the Bruce Lee movie, you know, where his he comes back, you know, from I don't know,
Fist of Fury, right?
I think it's
Fist of Fury.
Fist of Fury, yeah. And he comes back, and his sensei's died, you know, and he literally comes back to his sensei's funeral, you know.
Yeah.
And his Sifu's funeral, because it's a Chinese saying, right?
Yeah.
And you know, they later realized that he was poisoned, and that's it. Bruce loses his shit, you know.
That's right.
And that's it. It's got, you know, he's out of blood, man, and you know, he freaking like annihilates the whole fucking dojo. You know, people there's collateral damage along the way, and yeah, you know, it's a typical example actually of what the traditional meaning around and respect around Sifu and Sensei were. But you know, the one thing I would say is, a modern day example is if people have watched something like Cobra Kai or the Karate Kid franchise, especially Karate Kid 1 and 2,
Yeah.
which I think were the better renditions of it. And I also do like the Jackie Chan version. I thought that was fantastic as well. But what you do get an essence of that there, but with the Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai dojos, you actually see the duality there,
Yeah.
of a teacher that's actually really coming from a humbleness, humility. He's a very ascended teacher. He's got his own human condition issues as well. He's lost his wife and he's a bit, fucked up around that. He's still traumatized around that. But on the flip side, you've got Cobra Kai, and these guys are hard, just hard in mind and attitude, and it's where you see the students that join the dojo. They've come from traumatized backgrounds. They gives them some kind of meaning, but they're going about it in a very apathetic way and a really harsh, aggressive way, right? And actually, it's not soothing and healing at all. It's actually hurting themselves as much as they're hurting others. So I think there's a lot of truth within that. If you look at it deep down, it's wonderful, as entertainment as well. And especially the Cobra Kai franchise as well. It gets more chaotic as you go through the different seasons as well, and it kind of really talks to the fact that if you operate from that mindset, you're gonna create a lot of fucking drama, right? And drama is the antonym to peace, harmony. Let's get this in check. This is Maggie though. This is Cobra Kai.
But it's interesting the dynamic of how they actually bring those two opposites together.
Yeah.
And it's almost like saying, look, it's not just about the hard and the soft. It's like a combination of them, right? It's like literally bringing the two sides of the yin yang together to say, actually, this is the ideal. You need that side and you need this side, but it's be the ability to know when to utilize it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and that's the beauty of it all, right? Is you can actually tangibly experience that by watching that, and because you become absorbed in it, and it's emotional for those people that like it. There's loads of people that don't like that kind of martial arts kind of movie or franchise series, which is fine, each to their own. But those that are into it, they're absorbed, they love the action, the emotional kind of roller coaster that that it takes you on. But you do start to think, well, man, this is just unnecessary chaos and drama. And actually there's, even on the Miyagi-Do side, trying to remember his name now, Daniel-san, right? Daniel-san, he starts to lose his inner peace as well, because he's getting riled up by his inner childhood emotions, his teenage emotions from back in the day. And here is a grown man, that's really got his shit together, man. He's a successful businessman, lives in a beautiful house. He's, married to a gorgeous lady. He's got two amazing kids. And he's starting to get off center because of these dynamics. So again, if it was Mr. Miyagi, he would have brought him back to center, which is why there's this beautiful, like, nostalgic relationship between Daniel-san and the spirit of his teacher, which is kind of almost like, ethereally guiding him when he kind of goes back to Japan and tries to reconnect with things and things like that. And he has a shrine to him as well, where he kind of can meditate on him and with him and seek guidance through deep ethereal messages, so that's quite beautiful. So the other thing I wanted to also talk about is, just moving on very quickly, is Chodan, so the first degree black belt. Right now, the symbol for that is this symbol here. So for those of you that can see this on the video, you can kind of get a visual on that. Okay. Now it's made up of two characters. Okay. When they're put together, it's on the left, sorry, on the right is a knife. Okay. And on the left is clothing. It represents clothing. And what this basically means is Chodan or black belt means it represents how when you make a new garment, you must first cut the fabric. And Chodan or black belt, therefore, does not represent mastery, but rather the beginning of creating the martial artist, i.e., cutting the new cloth. All right. So I think that's fucking really punchy because
I didn't know that one. That's new to me.
yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
For me, when I first learned that, I had to write about it because I actually wanted to put. This is why I wrote this chapter, this to help really emphasize the power behind the meaning of a black belt. But also, it says, okay, not to put you on a pedestal, but actually, this is just the beginning, buddy. Right? You're just starting the journey, man. You're just starting to cut your character, right? Everything leading up to there was just for you to start to develop tools, right?
Yeah.
So I like to say, I've got this saying, a punch is just a punch, so it's learning martial arts. So what does that mean? So a punch is just a punch. So, learning martial arts is before black belt, you've got to cultivate your skills. So it's like, I use a painter's analogy, right? So when you first learn how to paint, you need to learn how to hold the paintbrush. You need to learn how to apply paint onto the tip of the paintbrush, then how to take that and create different kind of effects on the canvas. You can have to learn how to mix a paint, how to use different tools to create different effects within your desired outcomes, for your desired outcomes. Now, when you get to black belt, what we're saying is actually you've just learned how to use your paintbrush and all the different utensils that you use in painting, and understand paint, your artistic medium to apply to your canvas to create the certain types of effects and so on. But when you get to black belt, that's when you start to express yourself artistically. So what does that mean? Well, that means what are you drawing, right? What are you painting? Is it an abstract painting? Is it a portrait painting? Is it a landscape painting? Are you painting flowers, or are you painting houses, or whatever it might be, right? That's your personal expression of the use of your tools. But that starts all the way to black belts, just learning your tools and utensils, and after that is actually expression. So that expression builds up over time. And the more experience you get, the more advanced you get, that expression becomes more graceful, right? And graceful means there's dexterity, there's economy, there's beauty, all right? There's fluidity, all of these ease, come out of it, right? And, I've got a saying that says, before enlightenment, a punch is just a punch. During enlightenment, a punch is no longer a punch. And after enlightenment, a punch is just a punch, right? So you do it anyway, but without thinking about it, right? And obviously it's an adaptation of, before enlightenment, you carry water, cut grass. During enlightenment, you no longer carry water, cut grass. After enlightenment, you carry water and cut grass, right? So I try to adapt that, that saying to the martial artistry,
Yeah.
So I want to now move on to this. So in Jeet Kune Do, well, at least for Bruce Lee fans, there's a really famous saying, right, that Bruce came up with, which caused a lot of controversy back in the day. Now I want to talk about this for a second, right? And this is Bruce turned around, and you got to remember, man, this is late 60s, early 70s, and he turned around and he belted out this quote, and he goes, "Belts are only good enough for holding up your pants." Right? And he's referring to black belts here, yeah? Or black belts are only good enough to hold up your pants, right? So what do you think he's talking about?
So I think there's also that thing you were talking about before, right? Where you got that element of so we know with Bruce Lee, like, you know, getting stuck in a style or a way of doing things. And there is this, it does happen that anything you learn, you know, as you're going to it and you hit a certain milestone, you think this is it and there's no other way to do things, right? And whereas, like, we know that the masters are basically open to it, to actually say, no, this is just one path. Yeah. So in that kind of reference, I think Bruce is getting to having a conversation about that. You're rigid, you're fixed, you're in your ways, and you're not really acknowledging and adapting, but you're just using your status almost to hold up your status.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But, you know, I think it's also a sign of the times as well. And I think specifically that's what we need to really bring home here. You know, during the late 60s or even 60s and early 70s, you know, prior to his passing, there was a particular martial art that was really popular in the States, right? You know, and States is kind of like the geographic location where this is coming from, right? Mm-hmm. And that is Kempo karate. Now, or karate in general, but Kempo karate was created by Ed Parker, and not necessarily Ed Parker's Kempo karate, but potential karate schools that were churning out loads of students. And the idea of developing a regenerative business was to have a process that you would take the students through. Now, what certain martial arts schools did was they lured people in and kept hold of these students so that they would progress through the grading system, right? And that grading system was a lure to keep them attending the school and therefore being in a constant state of desire for the next belt. Yeah. So what happened back then was, and this is what Bruce is talking about, is there were a lot of people getting black belts, but they couldn't fight. Right. Now, that's not their fault. That's not the students' fault, right? That's basically them being lured into a business process to extract money. Yeah. So this is commonly referred to as muck dojos. Now, look, there's nothing wrong with martial arts schools running businesses and running this kind of grading scheme. But what happens at the end of this is you have somebody as influential as Bruce Lee turning around and saying, belts are only good enough for holding up your pants, is a massive insult to black belts. And that the reason for that is because there's black belts out there that can't fight, right? They don't have the fundamental minerals to go out there and actually uphold the values of what a martial black belt stands for. That's what we're talking about here. What does a black belt stand for? And somebody that has a black belt that can't do that, what does that mean? Now, when you see a 8-year-old kid that's a black belt on something, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, actually, is that upholding the value of what a black belt means? Well, just
in the process of that process.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It's a process of that process, right? So at a junior level, it's relative, right? But is that really what a black belt means? Now, I don't have the answer to that, but if I was going to be, you know, hard and fast about this, I'd say no, it doesn't, because it's just a child. Okay.
Yep.
But then how do you develop a child program and then have a process that entices them to go along? So I get both sides of it, you know. I'm not saying it's right and I'm not saying it wrong, but I'm saying that there is a core, right, to what the meaning and value of a black belt is. And the child is not there yet. And it's not the child's fault, but there also is a business process behind
it. Exactly. And it's interesting you share that, Lex, because it's if you look at, like, you talk about the time and suppose the evolution of things, right? And how, if we go back ancient times, we know when we used to have villages and stuff, there used to be 120 people max kind of thing in each kind of town and village, right? Because that was quite sustainable. A group of that much is quite sustainable. And as we kind of developed, we started to get cities, we had more people in the space. And people's lives got busier, and you can still see it. If you go to a village, for example, it's like a nice chilled out, slower kind of pace, whereas you go to the city and it's a lot faster and moving and there's a lot going on. So if you look at those dynamics over time, there's this kind of just, I suppose, natural kind of movement where you kind of, the old and the new are always coming together, right? And then something new forms. And when you look at it, is if people are going to schools, right? They're from a young age, like children go to schools, they come home, they got homework, parents are gone out. There's only a certain period of time in the evening where they can dedicate themselves to extra activities and so forth and so forth. And then that time is used for martial art training. They're only going in, I don't know, commonly, like it's usually about 2 classes a week kind of thing, right? Some people do 3, but generally it's like 2 classes is what I think most people, but people who want to progress do loads more, right? Yeah. So you got this kind of system going in place, but also then how are you tracking that? How can you keep an eye on these things as everybody's getting faster and moving forward? Then, if a kid's going and he's been training for 4 years, okay, he's got to a stage that he's a black belt within that system, yeah? But that's that system, that method, that process, the methodology. And then you got the other side of that is no method and no process methodology. So when those two things come together, can you really fight, right? Can you, and that's quite interesting, that evolution, because I think as a business, you got process, you're learning, you got that side happening. And then Bruce comes along and says, okay, I get that as a business, but no, it's not martial arts. It doesn't kind of fit that kind of model. So there's that conflict that takes place there. Right? It's fascinating.
So, and at the same time, there's also the other element of it that, no matter what age you're at, is the martial art giving you the ability to cultivate a better version of yourself?
Yeah.
And are you the best version of yourself for that age? Right now, again, very ambiguous and relative and open-ended kind of interpretations on this, but this is ideas that we're talking about here around that. And then there's the other aspect of it, right? Which is, again, these are things that are going to provoke thought. And this is, okay, so I mentioned black belt. Can you actually fight with it, right? Can you actually use the combatives, right? But, the biggest part of Jeet Kune Do, for instance, and it's the slogan, the quote that we use on the back of our school t-shirts is the art of fighting without fighting. The highest form of fighting is love. Therefore, is not to fight, but to dissolve and dispel aggression and conflict peacefully and lovingly, right? So, will a child be able to do that? Maybe, maybe not. Will an adult be able to do that? Maybe, maybe not, right? Everyone's, working on that process. And that's, ultimately what martial artists at the highest level is, when we're reaching the highest level state of consciousness, we're trying to get there. And at the same time, it isn't a destination that you can get to. It's a constant evolution, right? It's a constant process of cultivation, nurturing, and personal and professional growth in all aspects of yourself, all aspects of your being, whether it's in personal relationships with yourself and other people, family, friends, relatives, whether it's personal relationship with yourself in a work environment and professional environment, and therefore your colleagues and your professional expression within your career and vocation. Now, all of these things are not separate from us. They're all us, right? Because it starts from you, expressed inwards, outwardsly. And therefore, the black belt part of it is an evolutionary process, right? And I think the key word is process.
Process, yeah.
Process, yeah.
I was gonna say in line with what you're saying there is that so it's just a slightly different analogy. Like most people don't, far as I've been told, is most people don't do a lot of reading, right?
Yeah.
Some people might do 1 book a year, some may do 12 books a year, some may do 24 books a year. And there's a saying, like, especially when we look at it, if you want to become an expert at something, the more you can immerse yourself in that topic, right? Then say somebody's never read a book on it and you read 1 book on that topic, you got more expertise than that person now, right? But if you've read 12 books on that topic, now you're like almost expert level, yeah, because of your dedication and time. And it's similar in martial arts, because if you're doing, a couple hours a week versus someone who's constantly on it, like you're the MMA fighters, they're constantly on it. That's their routine. That's all they're doing is fight, 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 train, fight, train, fight. Whereas you got, the other side where you're trying to fit it into your schedule. So there's that element as well. Like how much time and dedication are you putting into something, right? That helps you hone your skill.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honing that skill, I mean, Dr. Napoleon Hill put it perfectly. He's the famous author of the book, Think and Grow Rich. I think Dr. Napoleon Hill actually was one of the initial people that triggered this whole thing, martial mind power, right? It kind of it was between, teachings that came to light with conversations that you and me had based around Bruce Lee's Chief, Deaf and Aim.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm digressing a bit, but the reason I bring up Dr. Napoleon Hill is because he talked about this one word, which freaking is awesome, yeah. And this word is stickability, right? Having stickability, you got to just stick to one thing. They say, a great example, right? Let's just say, at school, as you're growing up and you're trying to cultivate a skill, you're not great at it, but you just keep going at it. And then there's somebody that's really good at it. Let's just say football, right? You're okay at football, but you want to get better and you keep training, but there's somebody that's really good at football. Anyway, as you grow, your body grows and everything, you might be getting a bit better. This guy's not doing any training, just staying where they are, just using the same tricks and tactics and strategies that they've always done. This guy's getting training, man. He's going out to, football academy. He's getting better and better and better. He's just sticking to it. Before you know it, this guy's professional, right? All right. I'm simplifying matters, but let's just say this guy makes professional level. What makes him different? The difference is this guy kept going, stickability, vested in himself or herself, kept going. So exactly what you said. If you want to become a specialist in something, you want to become an expert in something, you want to become an authority in something, you want that credibility around it. Don't seek that credibility. Don't seek that authority. Don't seek that specialty. Don't seek that expertise. Just fucking keep doing it. Simple. Right? Stickability, man. Dr. Napoleon Hill nailed it right when he said that word.
That's right.
So I want to talk very briefly about when a black belt is no longer a black belt. Okay. Now, what do you think that means?
When a black belt is no longer a black belt, it's almost like that thing, that the stuff they talk about where, let's say driving. Yeah. So when you start to drive, you got no idea. And then you start to use your hands and your gears and your eyes and you're looking at everything. And then, you slowly practice and all of a sudden just becomes symbiotic and it's just movement and it's going and you're doing things without even looking now, right? In a conscious way kind of thing. And you get to a stage where you're just driving. Yeah. So it's a bit like that. So it's like you're learning the way, you get into it, you got to a black belt and now it's just automatic. It's just part of who you are, So it's similar to that.
Spot on, man. There's a beautiful analogy. It becomes part of you, it becomes second nature, becomes a reflex. Some people say, but the second nature part of it, I think, is a beautiful way to put it. In the beginning, a student sees a black belt as the highest level of martial arts. It's like, oh, I want to become a black belt. At the same time, just as a bit of a side note, a lot of people give up when they get to black belt, right? Because they think that's it, I've done it, I fucking reached the top. Yeah, that's just the beginning, mate.
That's just the beginning. That's so true.
Already said, you haven't even started to express yourself. All you've done is learn the tools and utensils and how to kind of put them together, right? Yep. Loosely, right? Second is an aspirational goal, and third, it's what people see as a role model and a teacher. But not necessarily teacher. Now I write a teacher, but not necessarily teacher. Why? Because it's a perception that is a role model and a teacher, but no. And I tell you why. The reason is there's 3 stages of learning, right? Learning in the student position, learning in the teacher position and learning in the observer position or examiner position, right? When you get to black belt, you haven't started teaching yet. You might have assisted here and there, but have you actually taught, stood in front of a group and broken down techniques and explained them why, what ifs, when, how, and all of that kind of business, you know? And as an assistant, even if you're an advanced student, chances are no, you're just assisting people with certain things, or you're assisting the teacher as a crash test dummy, right? Which is what usually happens. Yeah, they get the fucking pain. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's not until you start to actually teach, you start to actually translate into steps that somebody else can follow in a group environment through your own understanding of something. So guess what you have to do? You have to break down everything you already know into simple, easy to follow instructions for a beginner to an intermediate to an advanced person to do, then apply progressions for an intermediate, advanced, and beginner, intermediate, and advanced person to do, and provide teaching points so that you're sharpening their sword and making them a better version of themselves in whatever that thing that you're trying to teach them. Now, if you've ever tried to teach something, even if it's simple, that you can do very well, but you've never taught it, and you try and teach it for the first time, you're going to fucking think about it. Because you ain't got it. You have not got it. You're not competent in being a teacher. You're actually very competent in being a student. Right? And then the observer is even more, because not only are you observing how somebody's doing something, but you got bigger fish in play, right? And I tell you what you've got going on. You got to read the room. What's going on in that room at that day, right? Reading a room is a fucking advanced skill, yeah, that you get very good at when you've been doing this shit for over 20 years, yeah? Right? And I tell you what happens is you go into a room, you want to teach something, this is what's on the agenda, and the whole room has got completely different energy. They're not with it, yeah? And all of a sudden, oh, hold on a minute. Okay, I need to adjust my expectations of what I want to achieve and outcomes I want to achieve, and actually align it to where the students are now and to bring them up to the next level. Maybe they've all had a fucking bad day at work or whatever might be going on. If they're kids, they might have just had a really hard day at school, and what they need is something to re-energize and refresh themselves and then bring the energy back, so then they can refocus that into something more constructive. Right, in the corporate environment, where which is my sole focus, you know, I get corporate professionals come in. They've, you know, there's days where they're just not with it, man. If you start teaching them a whole bunch of technical stuff, goes over their head, because their mind is frazzled and fried. Yeah, if you've been in front of and this is through personal experience, if you're as a student. If you spend all day behind a computer and you go and start doing some really technical reflex stuff, man, nothing's working. You're behind on timing and everything. Why? Because your mind is still freaking focused on this computer and, 20,000 words that you've read that day, whatever it might be. And actually it's hard, right? And it doesn't work. So you've got to learn how to do that. You've got to learn how to read people's energy, read people's physiology, read people's body. Where are they? Trying to read people's minds and what are people thinking at the moment. You'll be surprised when you start to get into a higher state of martial artistry. You'll be able to read people's bodies, minds, and spirit. Or let me put it another way: bodies, mind, and energy, right? So you'll know exactly what's going on, and people think, oh shit, you must be psychic. Well, actually, you are. right? Yeah. We're all psychic, right? But you have to start cultivating that skill. But that's one of the highest levels, okay? So, so there's that aspect of it, right? But during our journeys, right, towards achieving black belt, there's blood, sweat, tears, there's laughter, and there's highs and there's lows, right? Your skill is tested, your fitness is tested, your willpower is tested, your fear is tested, your character is tested, okay? Your maturity is tested, your perseverance is tested, your emotional resilience is tested, your self-discipline is tested, your fighting spirit is tested, right? And now the biggest misconception about being a black belt is something that you earn. Wrong. Right? right? And the reason I say it's wrong is we live in an age, right, where you take your kids to school, you put them in a sports program, every kid gets a freaking medal. Every kid gets a certificate or whatever it is, or a sticker, right? Every kid wins. What we're doing is we're creating a fucking generation of expectant people that they will expect it even if they don't perform very well.
Yeah.
Because these schools have got these fucking deluded ideas that everyone's a winner. Well, no, the real world doesn't work like that. The real world says that if you perform extraordinarily beyond everybody else, then you're something special. But if you don't, then you're not anything special, and you're not really going to get the same privileges as somebody that stands out. Okay. Now that's the real world. So are we preparing our kids, the next generations, for that? No, we're not. We're not preparing them for that because we're setting false expectations. It's a curse that's going to come and bite us back later in life, because these generations are going to expect us to give it to them. But if you look, you've heard the famous saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right?
Exactly.
No one's going to give you anything for you to free. You've got to go out there and earn it. And you've got to go out there and stand out. You've got to go out there and make your mark. You've got to go out there and do something, give something to the world that's of value. And people say, yeah, take my fucking money, right? I want that, But in order to do that, you've got to have something special. So we're not necessarily doing that. So the black belt mindset is not something that you earn, or worse still, something that you expect. No freaking way. Yeah. It's something you become. Something you become. And that means it's part of you. It's in your character. It's in your personality. It's in the way you conduct yourself, way you treat others, right? How you do things, your ethics, your values, your morality, right? It's in you. It's in your spirituality, let alone your physicality and mentality. It's everything. It's expressing itself as the highest version of you and getting better each day as it comes. Yeah. Because you're continually sharpening your sword. So with that, you've heard Spider-Man's, most famous quote, with power comes great responsibility, right? So we're, with the black belt mindset, because it's a mindset first and foremost, expressed through the body and spirit, or spirit expressed through the mind, then the body. We're learning how to serve and protect our family, our friends, our loved ones, our colleagues, our community, fellow human beings, our fellow sentient beings, right? Our fellow Mother Earth, okay? Everything that we're exposed to is to protect and serve them, to uphold the values and virtues of your family and your employer, as long as they're also virtuous, of course, maintain honor and integrity, be a leader with humility, humbleness, and lead by example, always extending politeness and respect. So coming from a place of compassion, kindness, and love. Remember, we talked about that being the highest state of consciousness. Act consciously in all areas of your life, not just in the dojo. The dojo is just where you sow the seed and you water and nourish that seed, but you continue to water and nourish that seed outside of the dojo. Continue to sharpen your sword of self-mastery, and then transcend those learnings from the dojo to everyday life. And that's really where you start to shine as a black belt. People are like, wow, and something special about you. What is that? Well, I use a black belt mindset, and I'm a black belt in this, and it's taken me years to cultivate, but I'm actually the eternal student, and I've only just begun. And they're like,
it's
wow.
So true, Lex. It's so true. I mean, you're sharing that. I'm just like reminiscing, going through my journey from the past as well, right? And it's exactly that. In that moment when the sensei said to me, okay, you got this. What does that mean to you? And it's funny because it's like you said before, like getting into it, it was like, oh, I have to earn it, right? It's like a status, an achievement or some sort. Yeah. So you work towards it. And we used to have something called the spirit test as well. During the grading, you used to have the spirit test, which was testing exactly that. How far can you push yourself? Right. And I used to do stuff like that. And then, you go through it, you're going through your kind of belt system, you got this sense of pride happening, and you get to stage, you hit it. And then you think, okay, you've got it. But like you said, most people give up or stop basically after they've achieved it. Right. And I can remember that there was a time when I was learning and I stopped going. And I remember my dad said to me, why are you not going anymore? And I said, I don't feel like it. And he just looked at me and he goes, dude, I've spent money on you. Just get to a black belt and then do whatever you want. Yeah. Right. Because he was trying to teach me to achieve. He was trying to teach me to kind of push yourself. Right. Yeah. And I was like, do you know what? Okay, that's fair. I'm going to do that. So I pushed it, got to it. And then it's like you said, got to a stage. And then I went, now what? What do I do now? Right. Yeah. And when the sensei said that as well, then it dawned on me. To say, no, this, like, you have an expectation, but when you don't meet that expectation, then what? Right. Yeah. So you learn all these things along the way. Now what? Right. And that thing you said about the knife and the cutting the suit, that's exactly what happened, because now you start to utilize those tools to say, okay, what suit am I going to wear? What am I going to put on? What am I going to do go forward with this? Yeah. Right. And then I got more into it. Yeah. Right. I got more into it and I thought, yeah, wicked. And I wanted to. And then I discovered you got this dance system. What's that all about? I was like, huh? So there's another stage? Like nobody talks about dance, right? They always talk about black belt, but they don't talk about what goes beyond the black belt. Yeah. So to come across that and think, there's like a pro and a con. And one stage you're like, oh man, I got to do some more work now to get better and reach a dance stage now, kind of thing. And then you kind of have this next level of growth. And then the other side is like, that's wicked. You got something to aspire towards. Yeah. Right. So that whole journey is just like, it's what you become in the process. Yeah. Right. And what you've applied it, because it was not just applied in the dojo, it was actually applied outside. Right. Yeah. So all this stuff you're sharing is just like, oh yeah, I can see that now. So it makes sense. So thank you for sharing all that, man.
And I let me give you an example of how the black belt mindset helped me. When I was a kid, I was a little bit, I was actually quite extrovert. I used to show off quite a lot because when I realized I was good at something, I wanted to show people that I was good at it. And my parents, in particular, my dad, he was like, stop showing off. And he kind of like, it went the other way. I became a bit of an introvert, right? I stopped doing that because I was taught it was bad to show off. And I wasn't showing off in a way that, I was making out I was better than anyone. I was excited that I could do something like, if I was doing tricks on a bike or whatever, BMX bandits back in the day, And then later on in life, when I started to peel back the layers again or remove the veil, I started to realize actually what I was celebrating was myself. And as I was celebrating myself, and I stopped doing that. I started to inhibit myself. So one of the things that happened was I was terrified about public speaking, right? Now that's not a problem anymore. And the thing that helped me get over that was martial arts. And the realization was that actually this came very natural to me. And I've learned to put a lid on it to try and suppress that. So when I do public speaking, what happens to me is I get excited, right? And I get excited because my audience is my martial arts school, right? And I'm excited to lift them up. I'm excited for them to reveal some of that light, some of that spark, and really get that to shine. All right. And you see it on people's faces, their energies change, their aura changes. And what people might come in with like darker colored auras, right? But when they leave, they all leave in like bright beacons of light. All right. That might last for a short while, but they've tapped into it. They've tapped into it, and they're tapping into it until they can maintain that more consistently, Okay. So it becomes a really powerful tool, right? On how to apply that in areas of your life, other areas of your life, but not for you, for others. Now,
Do you know what's really also interesting on that side of it? Well, you were talking about earlier about Bruce said, well, how good can you actually fight? Yeah. And that was another learning because what happened was obviously, studying like jiu-jitsu for such a long time. And then the slight transition in between that was doing kickboxing. I really enjoyed that as well. And then what happened, people grow, move on, the club moved. And when the club moved, I was thinking, okay, what do I do next? Where can I go to another club? Found a different kickboxing club, right? Joined that club. And to some degree, it's like a different system and style. And, so you're almost like, in a way, beginning again to some degree, right? But you obviously got skills that you carry on. And then you look at it and think, you look at their like top student,
yeah,
right? And you're like, damn, that guy is good.
yeah,
Right. So it doesn't matter. You got black belt in some system or style. You look at the dedication of the other person and think, damn, look at the dedication and effort this guy's putting in. He's fighting on stage, like, for this country. Yeah. He's like going into championships and all this kind of thing. And then you have to swallow a humble pill there and think, oh my goodness, I've got work to do.
yeah.
I've got work to do. I really have got work to do. Yeah. And that was not possible without that kind of open and like you hit your learning or your thing and think, actually, there's still more to do.
Yeah.
There's still more to learn.
You shared this amazing story, which is become a really big anchor when it comes to emphasizing the bigger picture. And this was, I don't want to repeat this story and it's going to come back to you, right? They say, and then you told me that when you put a group of martial arts students from different disciplines in the room, they'll all argue and bicker around which martial arts is better, which one's more effective, which one's superior, and so on, right? But when you put a group of martial arts masters in a room, they will all talk about the commonalities.
Yep.
Right. The point being is that unification and collaboration is the key to greatest success, whereas a lowest vibrational state will separate, segregate, atomize, and break down things to the smallest unit until you're left with dust. Right? It literally will crumble to dust. Whereas on the other side, you are building something amazing, fucking skyscrapers, most beautiful buildings, palaces, right? That's what you build in there, right? On this side, you got fucking dust, literally nothing. Yeah. That's taking the black belt mindset to a whole new level, right? Mastery. And, Bruce used to hate the word master because he used to think that there was a common conception that master means you've attained it.
Yeah.
But actually, and I didn't use the word master for a long time until you actually realize a master is also in a constant state of learning, but they just happen to have a very high skill level, a lot of experience, and a really deep level of understanding around that topic. But they're getting better as well, right?
That's it.
So master is somebody that's the eternal student as well. We're all eternal students. If you consider yourself as you're learned and you're done, this is again another Bruce Lee quote or a Bruce Lee piece of writing that talks to when you stop learning, you become stagnant and stale. When you become stagnant and stale, you're in a waiting room ready to die. Okay. So we have to be the eternal students, and there's always something we don't know, and there is more that we don't know than what we do know, and we have probably forgotten more than we know right now. Get your head around that for a minute, right?
Exactly. That's so true, because it's like even just listening and having this conversation, you just remember things and you think, oh yeah, and then you think, and then you apply that same thinking and thinking, shit, like what else do I not know that I could be doing now that I'm not?
So much that for you to beg the thought to think about it will do discredit to it, because how can you quantify what you don't know?
Yeah,
you can't.
Exactly.
Can't. And then if you've had spiritual experiences like I have and do on a regular basis, I'll be honest with you, you cannot describe the indescribable, because there are no words to describe it. First and foremost, Sanskrit is the closest language that can describe the indescribable, but it is still very difficult to put into words. And unless you know a language like Sanskrit, which is an ancient language, over 5,000-6,000 years old, if not older than that. Just to give an example, there's over 100 words for the emotion of love, different of love. Over 100 words.
Wow,
that's amazing. We've only got one word for love, right? most of that when we talk about love, people think about sex. Right? Or they think about, let me give you an example, right? So there's love as in love making. There's love as in a love between you and your parents. There's a love between you and your siblings. There's a love that you have between you and your friends. There's a love of something. I love doing this thing, or I love my car, or I love whatever it might be. I love my t-shirt, Then there is this concept when you're in a relationship, I am in love, I am not in love, right? But it's the same word. And that word is very difficult because it's contextually, it makes sense. But there are so many contexts that actually Sanskrit has actually got 100 words to describe these individual types of those ones.
Wow.
Right? Which is amazing. Now that's a powerful, punchy thing to say. So the point being, you can't know it all, right? But you can at least try. Okay, you can at least try. And I actually would like to conclude on this chapter, which is full of emptiness. We talked about the true meaning of a black belt, and I hope we've been comprehensive. There's always something that we haven't covered. You don't know what you don't know. Just throw that in there as a bit of a disclaimer. But full of emptiness. I'm just going to read this bit, right? So a black belt honors, preserves, and promotes the roots of their ancestral teachings. They serve and protect their family against threats, and this is a massive social and leadership responsibility. During a black belt ritual, a Wudang Tai Chi grandmaster once said to his student, "Now you are a disciple. This is your home. Your business is our business, and our business is yours. Do you understand?" And we go on to talk about, and as we sharpen our sword of consciousness using the whetstone of self-mastery inspired by martial arts to discover who we really are, we start to realize it was never about I. It was always about nurturing and protecting us and our greatest matriarch, Mother Earth. As Zen Master once said, knowledge is learning something every day. Wisdom is letting go of something every day. A student full of black belt knowledge will eventually realize in order to continue on their path of mastery, they must empty their mind and leave everything they've learned behind, i.e. become a white belt again, so they are liberated to walk on. A black belt is a mindset which is full of emptiness.
Wow. That's a brilliant note to finish on, because it's deep on so many levels. And thank you for sharing on that, Sifu Lak. And that was, from the book Original Truth, which is available on Amazon, or you can go to martialmindpower.com. This book is great. It's great. It's got martial principles, mindset, spirituality concepts. It's again, we could do a whole podcast based on just elements of this book alone, right?
Which we will. And it's only 137 pages, so it's a really easy read. It's quite thin, right? But it's about martial living, or as the Mandalorian says, this is the way. How do you apply the martial arts mindset, or should we say, as context of this podcast, the black belt mindset into daily life, right? So for those of you that want to learn, this is the way, the martial way. This is a wonderful little book. If I don't say so myself, I say that humbly as possible. That, you know, hopefully you can pick up some really powerful learnings on this, which you can then translate into application in daily life, and ultimately with the highest positive outcome to help you become the best version of yourself, to put your best version forwards out into the world in personal, professional lives, and really to go out there and shine, people, man. This is your moment, you know. As they say, you know, if you can't change anything out there, then change your attitude. The best attitude to have is what we're saying here is, or one of the best attitudes to have, if you want to put it that way, is the black belt mindset or the black belt attitude. Adopt that attitude and you could change the way you see the world and the way you conduct yourself within that world. I always like to think that, you know, if we can be more like Mr. Miyagi rather than, you know, John Sensei, you know, we could we could actually really change the world, you know, one person at a time, that one person being you, right? And so be that change within the world. And in an age where, you know, we're in the dark age, right? We want people going out there, you know, revealing their light and shedding some light in that dark space to dispel that. And we can only but try. And here we are.
Exactly. Fantastic, Sifu. Thank you very much for your time and your knowledge and wisdom. And on that note, we're all signing out. Until next time, see you again. Thank you very much.